Story 1. Boyfriend opened up about his past, and I'm scared this is above my pay grade. Hey folks, this story coming up does have some talk about self-termination and some pretty severe childhood trauma. And so if you are uncomfortable with that in any way, no problem, just scroll to the times code that my editor has on screen right now, and you can skip this story. Okay, so I've, 27 female, been dating this guy, 26, for over 6 months, and I really like him. He's honestly the most mature and kind-hearted guy I've ever been with, and I do love him. He lives with his 8-year-old sister who he parents and cares for, and I made a post about this before, but he tried to introduce her to me. She seems okay with me at first, but then one day she randomly bit me, so we decided to keep some distance between her and I. He never told me their story, but today we were sitting down and he mentioned he finally felt ready. So the reason why he parents her is because their parents are no longer alive. He didn't get into detail here, but his mom had a history of really bad mental health problems, and it sounded like she murdered his dad and then killed herself while his younger sister was in the house, who was 6 at the time. Afterwards, he took emergency custody of his sister to protect her from going into the foster system, and he said she hasn't at all talked to him about that night since. He told me she does have a child psychologist and therapist who she sees regularly, and she's on medication, and so is he. He also mentioned that she has really severe bad abandonment issues, and even told me this genuinely heartbreaking story of one time he was late picking her up from school, and when he got there, she was uncontrollably crying her eyes out. He told me that he wanted to introduce me to her because she doesn't have a prominent female figure in her life, and he was hoping to change that, but in hindsight, doing so early on in the relationship was probably a mistake since he can't imagine how threatened she'd feel by my presence or how scared she is that I might take him from her. He started to cry at one point and told me that she's the best part of his life and the joy of his world and would rather chew off his D than leave her. I kept reiterating that I'm here for him and love him, but I didn't know what to do other than that. It seems like the two of them have been through a lot of pain, and I have no idea what I can do to help, or even if there is anything I can do. Is there anything I could do at this point? Alright, so, yeah, I think trying to, fix this and all that is definitely above your pay grade, and that's totally fine. That's very reasonable. This is something that a professional needs to help with. Not to say you can't be in this relationship, but it certainly gives you another level of understanding of what you're getting into and perhaps how fast you can be introduced into this family. Great to hear that the kid's getting therapy and support. Honestly, sounds like even this boyfriend could also maybe use some therapy and support. This is a lot thrust onto him and a lot to process and deal with. So yeah, I'd say the most you can do is just say that you'll be there for him and respect, how fast you're kind of introduced into his life that way. But if you do really care for this person and you want to make it work, then I hope it all works out for the best. Story 2. How do I tell my 55 female husband, 56 male, about my son's 28 male new girlfriend, 28 female? I apologize for any issues with the post as I don't really use Reddit, but I couldn't think of anywhere else to ask for advice anonymously. I have 3 sons, 32, 28, and 26. All of my sons are very successful young men and are on their own. My oldest and youngest were always very outgoing and were kind of party animals in high school and college. My middle son focused on his grades and future from a young age. He moved out the youngest into his own home. Anyway, my middle son had a very bad ex-girlfriend. I would like to say worse, but I read the rules here. Basically, they dated since 17 and she cheated on him several times. My son never left because he loved her, but eventually he realized she was a bad woman and left her. Only took 8 years. Anyway, my oldest got married at 29 and my youngest is engaged. They give my middle son a lot of crap because he's single, but I always say this is his ex kind of messed his sense of love and confidence. They don't understand what he went through. My husband agrees. 6 months ago, he started dating this new girl that we just met yesterday. I was happy to hear that he found someone. She's very educated and smart, according to him. They have similar personalities and interests. Considering my middle is kind of a nerd, that made me feel very happy to hear. Anyway, I wanted to meet her immediately. My son said that she's very shy and it would take her time. 6 months later, she told him that she's ready to meet us. So Friday afternoon, my husband decided to grill. Everyone comes over, then my son and his new girlfriend shows up. This beautiful girl walks in holding his hand and standing behind him. He was right, she's very shy. We all introduced ourselves, and we will call her Sadie. Sadie was quiet but said hi to everyone. She honestly associated the most with our dog that night. My sons go out and help their dad cook. My daughter-in-law goes out with my grandbaby and soon-to-be daughter-in-law, and her are best friends, so they go out together. I ask if Sadie would like to help me finish the sides and chop some stuff. She says sure. I just ask how they met and typical conversations. Eventually, my middle son comes in and comes up behind her and pokes her booty. She gives him a really look and hits him in the arm, and he grabs her and picks her up as they laugh. I say, put her down, don't be so rough on her. My son just says, okay, puts her down and goes back out. I said, sorry, 3 boys, sometimes they're a little too rough, but he's harmless. She said, I know he is. I used to wrestle with my dad and brothers growing up too. I said, your mom let her daughter wrestle her older brother and dad? She said, well, I used to be a boy, so I guess it was different, and giggled. I froze. I said, what? Her face went snow white and immediate tears rolled down her face. She said, he didn't tell you? I went, no. She said, I think I should leave. I am sorry. I grabbed her and said, no, stay here. I said, does my son know? She said, yes, he knows. She then said, I always bring it up on the first date, so if there are any issues, we don't waste each other's time. To be honest, I'm very surprised, but my son has never been so happy, so I dropped it. I honestly just couldn't believe it. I mean, you would never know. She's gorgeous. She asked if I thought of her differently. I said that you make my son happy, and as long as you treat him right, I didn't care. She just said thank you. I called my son today because his dad wants to get to know her more and wants to go to dinner with just them and us. He said sure. I brought up our conversation and he said he knows. He says that she is just really shy about it and doesn't talk about it at all. She just tries to run under the radar. He said that since you know, we need to tell Dad, but they discussed me kind of pre-telling my husband before tomorrow evening. Any idea on how, or should I tell my son before we go that he and she are going to have to do it? First off, good on you for being understanding. I know for some parents, especially from a little bit older generation, it can be, a little bit of a shock at first, but it sounds like you handled it well and treated her with, respect. Just had to get used to it for a second, so that's great. As far as your husband, whether or not you should be the one to tell him or them, I would say that, since they have asked that, you can kind of relay that, it might be nice. It might avoid the awkward moment of them having to bring it up. I would say, just bring it up in passing, make sure that it's not a big deal and everything, and he might be shocked. I don't know what his reaction will be, but I mean, obviously this has all already happened, so I hope that it went well and that he was, a kind, understanding person. So, yeah. Story 3. My husband's 38 male increasing franticness about having kids is making me, 33 female, not want them at all. Married 3 years, 33 female and 38 male. When we first got together, we were both pretty neutral on the topic of kids, with me leaning more no, and him finding the idea intriguing, but not necessarily for happiness. We both have fertility issues, so it seemed unlikely to happen anyway unless we made a major effort and got medical treatments. A year into our marriage, I had a pregnancy scare that turned out to be a late period due to stress rather than an actual pregnancy. During the time I thought I might be pregnant, though, something flipped in my husband and he got super excited and thought it would be great to start a family. When my period came, we agreed to not try, but not prevent. My perspective being that if a baby manages to claw its way here through our fertility issues, then it must be fate or something. But the idea of actively trying and pursuing fertility treatments sounded terrible to me, and I've just never had a desire for parenthood or pregnancy or anything related to kids in general. Over the course of the past year, my husband has become more and more obsessed with the idea of having kids, and eventually realized he would feel completely unfulfilled and depressed for the rest of his life if it doesn't happen. My feelings haven't changed one bit, but it became clear that we either try to have kids, whether bio or through adoption, or we part ways. After much talking, I conceded that it sounded better to be an old person who has a family than an old person who's child-free, and chose to stay with him and give him an old college try, with some boundaries up front that he agreed to. Those being, I don't want to do in vitro fertilization or anything where I have to take medication or hormones. I need him to promise to start cleaning if we have a kid. He currently does literally no cleaning. And I need our life with a child to also allow me to continue my career, which is my personal source of joy and happiness and fulfillment. We agreed to give me the rest of this year, 2023, to continue building my career and getting some certificates before starting things like intrauterine insemination and going to adoption agencies. This was very important to me since I've only recently gotten to a point in life where certain career things are possible, better finances allowing for entrepreneurship. With each day that goes by, my husband is freaking out more and more that we aren't already trying to conceive. He wants to make sure we have a kid in some form before he turns 40, either incubating in me or coming home from an adoption agency. He says the timeline we have, starting as the new year turns, is the very upper edge of what he's comfortable with, and that he's making a huge sacrifice by giving me the rest of this year before we start pursuing conception. Having a kid is all he can think about, and he feels completely preoccupied with the feeling getting worse each day. A few nights ago, he said that as soon as the new year comes, he wants 100% of our time to go into trying to conceive, researching kid things, researching adoption agencies, going to adoption counselors, etc., and that he doesn't want to do anything fun whatsoever until I'm either pregnant or we've adopted because we don't deserve fun until we have this figured out. We had a few events sprinkled throughout the year we were planning on going to that I consider really good for our relationship due to the connection and bonding time, but he unilaterally canceled all of them because he wants to focus on conception. I told him the picture he's painting sounds so awful and stressful that it will probably make it harder to get pregnant if anything. He said there's no other choice, and that this is just the way it's going to be until we have a kid. Nearly all of our fights are over this one topic now, and it's exhausting. He views me as selfish for not wanting to get started right away and is upset that I'm not on the same page as him yet, and has recently even started saying things like, the goals I have career-wise are meaningless and nothing matters in life except having a child and raising it into a good human being. My work is my way of giving back to humanity and brings me so much fulfillment. To have it be called meaningless by my partner was so hurtful. Before he started escalating the pressure for all this, I was starting to warm up to the idea in a much bigger way and was even starting to feel some excitement. Now that he's being so pushy with it and making decisions without involving me in the dialogue, like canceling our plans for next year, I just feel nauseated by the whole thing. Neither of us wants to get divorced. Even if we did, he doesn't have enough time to find someone else and reproduce with them in the timeline he's demanding. I brought up couples therapy and he's open to it, but from the angle of trying to get me to change my mind so that we can start sooner, rather than him trying to manage his anxiety around his 40th birthday deadline. How do we find a way to calm him down enough for me to rekindle my own excitement and turn this into a joyful journey instead of a stressful, fight-filled one? Why does this sound like a completely irresponsible kid begging to have a dog? And it's like, oh, I promise I'll take him for walks every day and I'll feed him and everything and take care of him. And then the parent gets stuck taking care of it. This guy sounds, oh my God. The fact that he's like demanding this and this is the timeline. I must have a child. Like, I get you want to have a child before you get too old so you can be active. You don't want to be, you know, the 65-year-old guy trying to play catch with his kid necessarily, I don't know. But to be so ridiculous and demanding sucks. The fact that he doesn't do any cleaning or chores right now when you both have jobs is just a massive red flag to me. Oh my God, like him like, yeah, I promise I'll start doing that when you have a kid. No, he won't. No, he won't. No, he won't. If he doesn't do any now, you already have a child. You already have a child that you're taking care of. Why do you need to have another? And then for him to dismiss your career sucks to that. Oh my God. Oh, that reminds me of, this is a quick story for me. Maybe I've told it before, but I had a coworker who was telling me about like the band he had and stuff, you know, because we were talking about like I do creative stuff, voice acting. He had a band. And he was talking to me about kids, and he's just like, oh, but you know, he's like, it's all going to change when you have kids. You're going to realize, because when I had kids, I realized that all that band stuff and everything, that's not important. The kid's the only thing that's important. And my response to him, the most clever thing I've ever said, I think, is I just looked at him and said, yeah, but I have talent. Feel free to use that one. Anyway, get rid of this guy. Story 4. Today I effed up by breaking 2 glasses at a fancy wine bar within 30 minutes of one another. On Saturday, I, 28 female, was at a fancy wine bar for my fiance's sister's 30th B-Day. While I was on my first glass of wine, I must have used too much force putting the wine glass down on the table, as the stem broke off cleanly and the wine was still in the bowl unspilled. Okay, no big deal. The bartender made a joke, "You're just too strong," and got me a second one. Was not embarrassing and moved on with a new glass. 30 minutes later, I was on my second glass of wine, still mostly sober, talking passionately. I must have gripped the glass too hard. It shattered, cutting up my hand, and I began to bleed, glass shards everywhere and wine all over my jeans. My fiance's sister whisked me to the bathroom to put band-aids on me. The bartender, very annoyed, cleaned up the glass. Everyone looked at me like I'd had one too many when I was essentially sober. It was terrible. The glasses were thin, but somehow I was the only one in our group to break a glass. Make those 2. After feeling the shameful urge to leave for the night, my fiancé convinced me to stay and we enjoyed the rest of the evening, even with wet jeans and bloody hands. Just want to add that I only ever drink on weekends. LOL. I gotta say, those sound like some pretty cheap glasses, because, like, if it's a nice, fancy wine bar, you'd expect them to have, like, some decent crystal. That stuff doesn't just break without some real force, so either, you're, like, finally, maturing enough to where you're hitting your Superman phase and the yellow sun has finally taken its effect on your muscles, or those sound like some kind of flimsy glasses. I don't know, I'm just saying. Or maybe it was all just a mistake, whatever, but, I mean, God, to grip a wine glass enough to where it shatters in your hand, though, like, we have a lot of wine glasses, and I've used a lot. Only wine glasses I've ever had that break really easy are some real cheapos, so, I don't know. Doesn't sound like the fanciest wine bar to me. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.